You're listening to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman on the Land of Israel Network.
Hello and welcome to Inside Israel Today on the Land of Israel Network on the landofisrael.com, where we are now less than 100 days left until the September 17th repeat elections, ladies and gentlemen, and probably less than 250 days left until our third election, our three-peat election that we would hope to avoid if possible. And people thought going into this election, it's going to be the same thing all over again. It's going to be boring. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that that is not true. This is going to be an exciting election, despite what people think. Netanyahu's still going to win, okay? You don't bet against Netanyahu. You don't bet against the Golden State Warriors, who won again this morning. You don't bet against the New England Patriots. It is possible for the New England Patriots and the Golden State Warriors to lose if you injure enough of them. But still, you don't bet against them, and you don't bet against Netanyahu either. So, yet, even though he has overwhelmingly the odds in his favor, this election will still be interesting. And the reason why it will be interesting is it will be different, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, different. Despite what everyone tells you, don't listen to them. It will not be exactly the same thing. Most of the parties will have the exact same candidates. But other than that, it will not be the exact same thing. I will tell you what will be different. If you thought the last election was nasty, watch out. This election will be nastier, and I'll explain why. I'll explain why Netanyahu has walked into a minefield. Okay, last election, no parties on the right could attack Netanyahu. All of their strategists told them that attacking Netanyahu will distance your voters. It's a bad idea. Don't do it. Naftali Bennett praised the Prime Minister Netanyahu and criticized Defense Minister Netanyahu and lost votes because of it. Because he didn't listen to strategists who told him you don't attack Netanyahu no matter in what role. You don't attack Health Minister, he's Health Minister, Netanyahu either. This time it's different. You've got Avigdor Lieberman, whose strategy will be to attack not only the ultra-Orthodox, but to attack Netanyahu. Now let's deal with the other side of the political map. In the last election, the center was led by Benny Gantz, who was advised by his strategists, don't attack Netanyahu. There were rockets falling north of Tel Aviv. He's a former chief of staff of the IDF. You had two more former chiefs of staff of the IDF on the list? No, they were not attacking Netanyahu because they didn't want to scare away those Likud voters who could potentially defect to blue and white. Blue and white's strategy was to get 3 more seats than Likud and give the president, Reuven Rivlin, who hates Netanyahu, an excuse to allow them to form the government instead of him. And so they weren't doing it. They weren't attacking Netanyahu. This time, I'm told, they will still run a relatively positive campaign. They will attack Netanyahu more than they did before, but that's not where the attacks will come on the other side. The attacks will come from further to the left, from Labor and Meretz. Labor in the last election was led by a man with no credibility whatsoever named Avi Gabai. He's going to be gone. And whoever, in my opinion, replaces him will have more credibility, will have more of a party behind him, still won't pose any serious threat to any other party, but will be a lot more visible than Avi Gabai was. Our guest that we're going to have in the second part of the show, Einat Wilf, is going to disagree with me on that. But I think whoever wins the labor leadership race on July 2nd, whether it be Itzik Shmuley, won the top spot in the primaries, and until somebody else does that, has to be considered the leading candidate. Or member of Knesset Stav Shafir, who is a young woman with a lot of energy, or whether it be a former general like Yair Golan, former deputy chief of staff of the IDF, or Eitan Kavel, a very bitter former Knesset member, or perhaps Ehud Barak, the former prime minister, former defense minister, former chief of staff of the IDF, and for the last few years, person making tons of money in business and tweeting incessantly. Any one of them would be a lot more visible than Avi Gabay, who the press largely ignored, who was dull, who was boring, whose opinions were all over the political map. One day this way, one day another way. Nobody really knew what he actually believed. Said the entire campaign he would never enter Netanyahu's government, put pressure on Gantz to say the same thing, and not only tried to get into Netanyahu's government, expressed disappointment afterward, and still to this very day says he wants to join Netanyahu's government. So it's going to be different. There's going to be someone out there who's going to be unleashed and will have plenty to say. That will be very interesting. Further to the left, there's a party called Meretz. It still exists. In the last election, they were led by a woman named Tamar Zandberg, who is a very, very nice person. Her attacks on Netanyahu weren't really noticed. She's facing a leadership challenge from a former Knesset member named Nitzan Horowitz, who is tough. He's a tough guy. And if you see an attempt of a labor led by Ehud Barak or Stav Shafir, and Meretz led by Nitzan Horowitz to form a camp that would run together. Nitzan Horowitz yesterday talked about there being protest movements that would join together, which is a nice code word for saying the name of the ultimate Israeli bad boy. His name is Eldad Yaniv. Remember that name, ladies and gentlemen. You probably haven't heard of him. He was a bureau chief of Ehud Barak for a while when he was prime minister, when he was defense minister. He ran for Knesset with Labor. He's run for Knesset with a party called Eretz Chadasha that did not cross the electoral threshold. And he led protests outside the Attorney General's home in Petah Tikva for more than a year that were mean, pressuring him to step up his investigations of Netanyahu. If you have Eldad Yaniv running together with Labor, running together with Meretz, both with new leaders, this election is going to be a lot more interesting than people give them credit for. So stay tuned to www.jpost.com and to Land of Israel Network for all that excitement. And after the break, we will be speaking to Einat Wilf, former Knesset member from the Labor Party and from the Independence Party that broke off from Labor, about the future of the Labor Party. She's my first guest after the election, if anyone's noticed. Since the election, I have not had a guest for two reasons. Number one, I missed 3-4 shows because of speaking to her. 3, I think. And also because I had too much to say in the limited time that I had. But last night, I was on I-24 with Einat and a former member of Knesset, Yossi Yona, on a panel. And Einat said such interesting things that I said, I got to have her on my show today. So stay with us.
Josh Haston here, host of Israel Uncensored on the Land of Israel Radio Network at thelandofisrael.com. Make sure you check out my show every Monday, bringing you the news unfiltered and uncensored, information that you are not getting anywhere else, especially not in the mainstream media.
Israel Uncensored with Josh Haston on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com.
And we're back here on the Land of Israel Network on thelandofisrael.com, where, as I promised, we have our first post-election guest, former Knesset member from the Labor Party and the Independence Party, Dr. Einat Wilf. Thank you for coming on our show.
My pleasure.
Remind our audience, what are you doing nowadays?
I am speaking and writing, and my book, The War of Return, is upcoming in English, so that's exciting.
The book, The War of Return, look for it on Amazon in English in the near future, ladies and gentlemen. Okay.
Thank you.
Now that we got your plug in there, as I was telling my listeners at the end of the first half of the show, I was on a panel on the I-24 network last night with Einat, and we were speaking about the future of the Labor Party, and we disagreed. I spoke about how if they elect a new leader, for instance, Ehud Barak, perhaps Stav Shafir, that they could get some teeth and become nasty, and the party could have a future even running on its own again. Einat, why did you disagree?
Because I genuinely think that the notion that what's missing for the party is a new Messiah overlooks the fact that the problems are serious and deep, and in many ways go to the heart of what Ehud Barak did in the year 2000, when he tried to make peace with the Palestinians and came back with the clear message that they're not ready. And I think the left has been in disarray ever since, never has come to terms with that basic fact. And I really think that it's in deep crisis. So it could do, I think, better by maybe connecting with merit, or maybe one leader could do a little better than others. But I don't see it becoming, again, a broad tent party that can claim the leadership of the country.
And you said last night also that blue and white has become the Labor Party. What does that mean?
Well, in this election, it's very clear that you've seen a transformation of names. So blue and white, with its 35 seats, essentially became what the old Labor Party used to be, a party of generals. This is where the generals went. Headed the party someone from a moshav, a traditional Labor Party area. And it also reflected central views. It was a big tent. It had people from the right, people from the left. It really channeled old Labor. And as a result, it also channeled the old Labor vote. That's why it got 35 seats. And Labor became what Meretz was, which is a nice adjacent party, kind of a help party that is staffed by dedicated parliamentarians that are devoted to important social causes, who are very effective in parliament. But it's no longer a leadership party. In this election, no one even thought seriously, and even Avi Gabay did not pretend that he's a prime minister candidate. And Meretz actually became transformed into what Hadash used to be, which is a Jewish-Arab partnership party. And I think these transformations are likely to be quite permanent, in the sense that, again, Labor and Meretz could go together, but it's more of a permanent transformation into a left-wing party and not a party that claims to lead the country anymore.
Even if Ehud Barak would come there, you've had a lot of Ehud Barak time. What do you really think he's up to?
I don't know what he's up to anymore. But all I can say is this. There's no doubt that Ehud Barak on Twitter and on TV has been a kind of good media opposition to Netanyahu. But I'm not seeing it being translated, and I've seen many polls, I'm not seeing it translated into electability. And I know that Ehud Barak likes to say, I'm the only person who ever beat Netanyahu, but we need to remember that he did it in a freak election under a system which was a bizarre system, a unique Israeli invention, which happily was not repeated after that, where people could vote directly for a prime minister, but also for a party. It was only under that system that Barak beat Netanyahu, and even then he was not able to hold on for power for long, and he was not able to create a stable coalition. And at the end of the day, ruling in Israel is about creating stable coalitions, and I think in that, Barak does not show to have been successful at that.
Now, I'm not suggesting Ehud Barak to be elected prime minister either. I see the same polls that show that he's among the most hated people in the country. Sarah Netanyahu, if she didn't exist, he might be the most hated person in the country. So, yet, I do think that he can have a significant impact on this election if he takes over the Labour Party, and he could keep the party together and keep it alive and even make it grow stronger. You don't think he can do that either? You said that that's beyond him.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I really think the problems run deeper. In many ways, he could exacerbate them because he would make it more difficult for the Labour Party to, again, choose what it wants to be, because he's clearly aiming to be prime minister. He would not, he always had deep disdain for the notion of being in the opposition. So he would want to be a leader. But then on what platform? Labor is clearly no longer a platform for leadership. And the people within Labor, who are right now the dominant number, who want Labor to be a social party that is very strong on social issues.
Like
there is nothing. Yes, and Stop Shafir. This is really not Barak's kind of strong point. So he might even exacerbate the tensions within the already very, very small party, and perhaps lead it sooner rather than later to being split between the social forces that might join Meretz, and maybe he would somehow join Blue and White, which is really where I think he feels that he belongs.
And I don't think Blue and White would want him. There's no vacancy there for another aging Ashkenazi, former chief of staff of the IDF. They've got their share of those already.
Yes.
What are your predictions for this election? Is it just a cakewalk for Netanyahu?
Oh, absolutely not. It's very far from a cakewalk. The loss of power has a very interesting dynamic. The reason we have this election in general is because of power overreach. If Netanyahu wanted to be prime minister, if that was his only ambition, it would have been a cakewalk. He would have cobbled together a coalition super easy. The problem is that this time he didn't settle for being a prime minister. He wanted to be a sultan, not very metaphorically. He was essentially trying to hijack Israel's system of governance from within this system. And in many ways, it rebelled, and which is why we're going to new elections. So this is power overreach. And what we're seeing is already voices from within his camp beginning to say this is the end. And the dynamic of power overreach is that when you begin to have the first chink in the armor, there's almost no stopping it. So how Netanyahu will be 4 months from now, it's very difficult to tell. If already now you have people from his camp saying, absolutely, it's time to move on beyond Netanyahu. Netanyahu is no longer good for the right-wing agenda. If he will not be able to get another delay for his legal procedures, it is clear that he will go to the elections as a very weakened candidate. Does that mean that someone will already challenge him before? There's a lot of time until the election, so we're already now seeing that it's not going to be a cakewalk.
Just to support what Einat is saying, both Avigdor Lieberman and Moshe Feiglin have said, we will support a candidate from the right, but they won't say Netanyahu's name to form a government. And when I saw that the first time, I'm like, what do they mean? What do you mean a candidate for the right for prime minister who's not Netanyahu? And they don't have to define it. But the very fact that they're saying it that way is interesting. And Naftali Bennett is saying he won't let Netanyahu get away with bypassing the law, that he's going to be tough on that if he manages to have a political comeback. That's also a change, and it's a trend that can potentially lead somewhere. My last question for Einat, are we condemned to a third election and a fourth and a fifth and a sixth going on here?
No, I don't think we are. Again, We've all learned not to rule out what was extremely unlikely. But no, I think precisely because this was such a highly unusual situation, in fact, unprecedented, we will see the political map organizing to prevent that. The reason we're in this unusual situation because of Netanyahu's power overreach, and I think we're already seeing the political system beginning to organize against him attempting that a second time.
Well, you heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. Einat Wilf has her money that there will not be a three-peat. Thank you, Einat, for coming here on the Land of Israel Network, on thelandofisrael.com.
My pleasure.
And listeners, I want to thank you for listening to this show, and I also want to thank in particular the people who came out of their way on the Shabbat of Shavuot weekend, some of whom came up to me and said, I listened to your show and I enjoy it and I look forward to it. That really warmed my heart. I had a fun time with the people that came out to the Mount Zion Hotel for the Shavuot of a lifetime, and I want to thank the organizers of that event, Andy Altshuler and Ari and Jeremy, of course, and the other show hosts here that were involved, Yishai Fleischer and his talented wife, Malka, and Eve Harrow and her talented husband, Dr. Earl Harrow, for making it really be a holiday that was very special. So thank you, listeners, and we'll have another fun and exciting show next week from here in Jerusalem. Bye-bye.
Hi, this is Eve Harrow, host of Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. You can hear a new show from me every Sunday, and every day of the week, shows from another one of my very talented fellow show hosts. Reach me, Eve, at thelandofisrael.com, and keep listening, everybody. We love your feedback. The Land of Israel, coming at you every day, every week. That's the Land of Israel Network on thelandofisrael.com.